Welcome to Six Pack Discussions, where Cody and Jared take on the biggest, most talked about headlines with logic, passion, and a six-pack of beer.
If you're listening, we challenge you to take an unbiased view of the world, because we know these conversations are complicated. So sit down, crack a beer, and welcome a new perspective. Okay, guys, coming in, new episode, Six Pack Discussions. We are live. Jared, what are we drinking today, buddy?
Ooh, today we are drinking Voodoo Ranger Fruit Force.
Ooh.
Fruit Punch IPA. Dude, I am 85% positive that we've done this beer on this podcast.
No, fruit juice. Juice Force.
Okay, I was saying no, because we've done a Force before.
Juice Force.
So different. You're 100%?
It's orange. And the reason I saw this, and I was like, no way, they came out with, because their Juice Forces, I think, their most popular IPA. It's in that orange can. It's got the same kind of Air Force looking guy on there. And I saw this, and apparently, and I just got word from one of our listeners actually over the weekend. He's like, hey man, you guys did Juice Force a while back. You should get Fruit Force. And I was like, dude, it's actually in my fridge right now. I had that exact conversation.
Oh, funny.
So that's why I said I wanted to do it today, because we got a couple of options in the fridge. You know what? I had the conversation. Let's go for it.
I love it.
So, yeah. So we're doing Voodoo Ranger, Fruit Force. Dude, we are talking about probably one of the most conflicting, not conflicting, but one of the the largest conflict that could occur in our lifetimes. What do you think? Do you think that's a preamble to the largest conflict?
I was going to say, okay. Yes. And it just became a lot more real with Russia and Ukraine.
100%.
And U.S.'s response to Russia and Ukraine.
So we're talking about today, guys, not Russia and Ukraine, because that's talked about a lot. And of course, it's ongoing still, right? The war in Ukraine is still going on. But what we're talking about is China and Taiwan. And why there's even conflict here? Why there's even like the wars in the air between those two nations? Yeah. And me even seeing that they're two nations is actually a conflict.
I was just about to say, that in and of itself is almost highlighting your opinion.
Exactly. Well, I'm just saying it because I don't know any other way to describe them two, because clearly there's two separate governments.
Oh, very separate governments.
But one government believes that the other one is a part of it as kind of its own jurisdiction. Like it feels like, and guys, China feels like Taiwan is like Montana. It's a state underneath Chinese rule, right? Taiwan's
it's Hawaii.
Exactly.
A little island
off
of the
100%. Taiwan's like, no, we're actually our own state. We have our own governing body. We have our own law system. We are not China whatsoever.
They have their own government.
100%. And they're completely democratic.
I was like completely separate, by the way.
Oh yeah. No, there's no one leader. There's not communists. They are a democratic party. They do elections every 2-4 years.
Yeah.
Just like we do.
So, guys, and the reason why I want to highlight a couple things. One, the reason why it's a little bit more often talked about is twofold. One, China is conducting air maneuvers increasingly closer and closer and closer and more frequently to Taiwan. Mm-hmm. A, that's kind of like, oh, that's kind of awkward. B, what is the term? Am I going to mess it up? Strategic ambiguity? Is that like the U.S.'s official stance? Is one China, one government, or one China, one government?
Yeah. Well, we believed in one China policy up until President Biden last year stated that if China invades Taiwan, we will defend Taiwan, meaning that we believe Taiwan's a different nation. But
did the government then not kind of correct President Biden and said something to the effect of, well, yes, we still believe in one China, one government, or one China policy.
Yeah. We
believe in strategic ambiguity. I thought was kind of that cop out.
It's like a placeholder for believing Taiwan's real. Super, super odd, super confusing.
So here's what's interesting is people are making a lot of parallels to this Russia and Ukraine to China and Taiwan. But they're always saying little asterisks. Oh, well, U.S. early last year started sending U.S. troops to Taiwan.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
We didn't put any troops on the ground. We sent kind of a
in Taiwan.
Ship. Yeah, we just did a ship, right?
Maybe I misread, but I thought in mid 2021 we started actually sending troops to Taiwan.
Maybe, but we don't have a base there in Taiwan. That would be China would never allow that.
No, we don't.
So I don't know where those troops would go. They need a base essentially, right?
I mean, you could just
house
out on one of their bases, right? They have 300,000 military members.
They do, yeah. So I guess they could have.
Guys, I apologize if I'm reading fake news. I'm trying to flip through my notes.
No, so as Jared's going through this too, because he could be completely right here. I don't know for a fact, but I just know that we've done some naval maneuvers, kind of showing that hey, we are here, and this actually brings back to some history. Something really cool. I watched some old video from the 1990s. Really cool. China said, "Hey, we're going to go ahead and invade Taiwan and take it back underneath, communist rule." And that was, 30 years ago that they stated that. So what I found kind of interesting is Clinton. So President Clinton sent the entire Pacific Fleet, multiple carrier groups, destroyers. Huge kind of show of force and did a complete sail around the island of Taiwan as just like a parading of
elephant walk. Yeah.
Yes. And China did not do one more air pass, right? Which is fascinating, I think.
Honestly, those elephant walks is kind of like, I don't know if that's an official term, but that is definitely a military term. Guys, I'm going to stop looking. Maybe I misread. Clearly,
no worries.
Clearly, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's not like we're mobilizing or anything. We just have, the elephant walks are such an interesting tactic there from a show of force, because essentially what the Air Force equivalent is on your airstrip, you will essentially display all your badass fighters, right? Your big boys, your bombers.
They got satellites and stuff.
And they're looking at you, so it's like, go ahead, poke it.
Count them.
Poke the bear. I dare you.
So he did that in 96 or 97. Clinton did that. China settled down. All of a sudden, everything kind of cooled down for 20 years or 30 years. So, fall of this last year, this is kind of so far the height, I would say, of the tensions between Taiwan and, this is 6 months ago, Taiwan and China. China essentially states that we will probably invade Taiwan by 2024 if they do not. They actually give a date. So they do flyovers. Hundreds, not of the country, but in their airspace, as Jared was referring to, hundreds a day.
There's an exponential growth.
And what this really means, guys, is if you are on a shoreline, right? So imagine standing on California beach, and you look out, I don't know, 20 miles, and you can see planes 20 miles. I know that sounds far.
That is that's right? Well within the average.
So you're looking far. All of a sudden, 20 miles offshore, there is a Chinese communist fighter, and there's one. And that one flies back, and then there's another, and 100 go by for a whole day. And they do this consecutively, multiple times in October and November. So President Biden says, hey, guys, elephant walk time. So he sends a carrier group, does the same thing President Clinton did back in the 90s. Goes around the Strait of Taiwan, which is kind of the area of water, the ocean between China and Taiwan. The next day and the next 30 days, China continues doing it. So where they stopped 30 years ago, they did not stop this time. So the elephant walk, in your kind of term, did not actually do anything. China felt that they were secure enough with their presence that U.S. full carrier group, which is 15, 20 ships, submarines.
You know what I equate that to? And I may be kind of effed up on this analogy, but I think I might be onto something. And I think this is an analogy that every young man can relate to. Do you know how whenever you're growing up, your dad could kick your ass physically? Oh, yeah. But there's always that point. Because Father Time is undefeated, and obviously you get bigger and stronger. Yeah. There's always that point in a young man's life where your dad says something to you, and you're probably, it's probably in those teenage years. Late teenage years, early 20 years. Your dad says something, and there's a look. It usually doesn't come to the physical force. Yeah. But there's a look that the son gives, just like, look, old man,
I got you now.
that shit worked a year ago. Is
That's
that
a perfect analogy.
Is that a good analogy?
Yeah. I'm not saying that China by any means is the son of America.
No,
But yeah, I agree. I get it. I
to
love
where
it.
30 years ago,
Yeah.
it's like, oh shit, China. Like,
China
US.
China didn't have one ship to its name. It had 10 prop planes right in the 90s. Like, it didn't have a military. Like, let's be real.
But do you think every guy can relate to that analogy right there?
100%.
All the girls that are listening right now, they're like, what
you
the fuck are
talking
these guys talking about?
Every guy that has their father in their house,
Yep.
they know that when they were 18 or 19, they said, hey, your dad said, hey, go clean up the shit in the backyard with your dog. And you're like, and you give him the look. I'll do it tomorrow. And the dad has to make he's got to make the decision. Is this worth a possible physical altercation? And I know for women, they don't know this. They don't know this because you just don't go through this.
And you don't talk about it.
No.
I bet Brittany and Anna, whenever they listen to this, they'll have no idea what we're talking about.
Men are at the point of physical altercation with their father
More times
once
than
a
you can
week,
count.
once a month.
More times than you can count.
In their teenage years. And sometimes it gets, of course, physical.
Yeah.
And then other times it's like, hey, do we really want this to turn violent? And it happens. And I think that's a great analogy. Great analogy. I love it.
I didn't know I was going to make that, but
It's one. And so China at this point said, hey, that shit ain't going to work this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. And they are continuing doing their kind
air
of
maneuvers
and kind of showing Taiwan, hey, we can go in your airspace anytime we want.
Mm-hmm.
And you really can't do anything about it. And if you want to, we're now on defense, right? They attacked us first. And that's really what I think China's trying to invoke almost is like, hey, we didn't do anything aggressive. We're just doing air maneuvering.
We're just training.
Yeah.
What, we can't train?
And now we can't train. We're just trying to make sure we're prepared for the big force of USA. And now Taiwan, of course, attacks them. So I thought that was interesting.
So why do you think so many parallels are being made with U.S.'s response to Ukraine with Russia invading it?
I think it's wrong. Personally, I don't think there's a lot of parallels. I think we would do a completely different tact with Taiwan and China. And I'll get to that in our last beer. But I think the parallels there is because Russia was the big dog prior, and now China is the big dog next. And I think they're kind of like, oh, well, whatever Russia's doing is probably kind of what China would do because they've taken the second superpower role.
So one thing that I think is kind of effed up on China's part, I was reading a little bit, and I wasn't able to get too far in the rabbit hole, but I wonder if you did. What do you think about this soft, if not hard policy of China that they're trying to use with a lot of companies around the world use them being China for various manufacturing jobs? And so they're essentially communicating to companies like, hey guys, if you recognize Taiwan, basically F you.
Yeah.
Right? What do you think about that play? I mean,
China has to do that.
I
right?
don't hate that personally because it is a very non-violent.
Yeah.
They're giving the company the choice.
Yep.
Hey, that's cool. This is my stance. If you want to build your widget in my land,
Yeah.
don't talk to my little brother.
Yeah, I think China, what they've done is they've stated that right now, Taiwan is a rogue state. And it's kind of like when you're a parent, to tie it into, my kiddos. If one of my kids do something that just is kind of against our family values, right? And that's kind of what Taiwan's doing, is they're going against the grain.
Completely.
Yeah. And they're essentially kind of showing the neighbors that kid is now essentially sovereign. They don't need their parents. Exactly. And China sees it as is like, hey, that kid still gets out of my fridge. That kid, I've stated to everyone else that this is my child. This is my child. That child is saying, those are my parents. And so what happened here is I think if any country, and that's why China's so aggressive with their one-child policy with other countries and other companies, they say, hey, if you believe Taiwan is real and their own sovereign state, you now don't believe China has jurisdiction over its own laws or its own rules, or it doesn't have its people under control.
So they're essentially extrapolating your decision to recognize Taiwan as the greater disrespect to the
entire group.
Yep.
Exactly. They're like, hey, if you don't believe what I'm stating and you believe that rogue agent, you don't trust me, you don't believe me. Why would I want to do business with somebody that doesn't trust me or believe me? And you believe now this rogue nation, this rogue little group of people.
And honestly, I actually really am buying into your analogy as far as one of your children, because Taiwan was originally a part of China in I think it was 239 AD.
All the way up until 1948.
So.
Right, World War II. So World War II ends. Japan was invaded and occupied by Japan for a long period of time, 30, 40 years. During World War II, the president or the leader of China, I can't pronounce his name here, but he goes...
like the M or me or my or...
No, it's not Mao. Mao comes after.
Okay.
So he goes down to Cairo, and he does the Cairo Declaration with the leader of the U.S., the leader of UK, and a couple of the allies, essentially. Yeah. And he says, hey, guys, by the way, Japan just took Taiwan from us a couple years back. We need that back. So he gets Taiwan back, the leader of China, right? The Republic of China, which was the essentially kind of like a capitalist type group, more of a democratic type group. 3 years later, the Communist Party rises up with Mao Zedong. He, during it was essentially a civil war, Communist Party versus the People's Republic. They go to war for several years, 3, 4, 5 years.
I thought the Civil War happened in the 70s between the two.
No, that's Vietnam War, which is also kind of a civil war a little bit.
Yeah, but I thought the Civil War okay.
No, it's right after World War II.
Okay.
So late 40s, that all happens. So the Republic of China, which is the non-communist party, along with their leader, that negotiated that whole deal with the Western powers, they retreat to Taiwan. So all of the capitalist and the kind of democratic type people, right, more of Republican type, republic type people, they retreat to Taiwan and kind of create their own little power. And ever since 1949, China has been upset that they essentially didn't get all of the non-communist. Because 1949 on, Mao Zedong owned mainland China, and Taiwan has kind of done their own thing. So you can imagine there's still kind of like that threat of hey, we never really won the war. They just retreated to an island.
So here's what I don't understand. So that's 1949. I thought it was the 70s. Maybe I'm misremembering. Really doing great.
70 years ago, maybe.
Maybe that.
Okay.
Whatever. Yeah. Thank you for the defense, but
yeah.
Maybe. But here's what it was unclear to me. And is the answer as simple as China just couldn't do shit about it until now? But why is this a growing concern?
They couldn't do shit before.
Is that all it is? Yeah. It's hey, I wasn't strong enough.
Taiwan.
So is it really that analogy? Hey, now I can.
I think China, of course, was coming out of massive poverty, right, during the Mao Zedong era, right? Up until the 80s, 1 in 3 children died of just not having enough food, right? They just always were dying from poverty and lack of food. And then all of a sudden, China opened up to the rest of the world with Bill Clinton in the 90s, right? He opened up the doors to trade with China, communist China, which for a long time, no one wanted to trade with them because they were communist, right? They essentially kind of didn't let them into the national pool. As soon as we opened the door up, it became an industrial powerhouse, right? And so now all of a sudden they were able to actually get parts for their planes. They were able to actually build their own tanks. They were able to build their own ships. They probably couldn't have crossed the Taiwan Strait, 110 miles of ocean, up until probably 20 years ago. So that's probably why.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I thought that. I mean,
yeah.
It's just such a funny thing to say. It's damn, I want to do something, but I can't. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Here's another thing. Actually, are you in your second beer?
Almost.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So here's another thing I want to shoot for you. if you condone someone doing something wrong, you yourself are not doing anything wrong, but you condone someone else doing something wrong, what does that do to the condoner?
Okay, so
So-
let's
so-
say real quick,
Go ahead.
easy one for me, right? I would say up until recently, and I'm not saying like anything's really changed that much, but I just kind of don't care anymore. I think on this one, I guess it's just getting older, and I'm like, what do I care? But I would have condoned somebody that maybe openly did some drugs in front of me, other than alcohol or caffeine. I would have been like, I would never do that. I would condone that. Is that what you're trying to say? Or no? Maybe I'm wrong.
Something a little bit. No, you're along the same, but I'm talking about like something severe, like let's
murder.
say you are not an adulterer, right?
Okay.
But
Adulterer means like cheating?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Our listeners like, shit, this guy knows a lot about China and stuff, but he doesn't even know what adulterer means. Sorry.
yeah, well, that's good news for Anna. So you are clearly not an adulterer,
Yeah.
right? But let's say one of, not like your best friend, but let's say someone that you are closely acquainted with
Yeah.
is,
And did it. And I found out.
and you are condoning it, right? You are even equal acquaintances with their wife.
And condoning it means that you're kind of going along.
You're
with
okay
it.
with it.
You're kind of like what's that called?
Like you may not do it, but you're like, I'd rather not talk about that.
Yeah, interesting. I see what you're saying.
So that's almost like the U.S., China, and Taiwan relationship in my head. Because we don't have the balls, and I know that I'm oversimplifying here, but we as U.S. don't really have the balls to go ahead and say kind of where we're at. That strategic ambiguity kept on getting brought up. But yet we still want to do business with China. One, because we kind of owe them a lot of money and owe them a lot of infrastructure and manufacturing, et cetera. But it's like, hey, if you screw with Taiwan, then we're kind of on their side too. You know what I mean?
And I think that's
Do you see what I'm getting at? Is that
I think we are with that with all countries. I think for a non-one government world to work, you have to condone actions of other nations. I'm sorry.
So there's difference between condoning actions that you may not necessarily believe in, but then there's also going to the extreme. Like there's grays and then there's black and whites. Am I wrong? Out of all the varying governments in the world right now, you don't think we're pretty polarized to China?
No, I understand. I'm taking a deep breath here, guys, because I'm trying to I'm trying to take China out of it and Taiwan out of it and think of how we would treat other countries and their laws. And I don't think I'm trying to think of a law that we think is crazy that they don't have. So, for example, Mexico. Mexico does not allow their private citizens to own firearms.
Okay.
America, of course.
Same with Taiwan. They
America,
have
of
to
course.
practice with air guns, right?
Yeah. America, of course, we're the complete opposite. We have a lot of firearms, more than people. So, would we say, hey, Mexico, you need to change your laws and equip or allow your public to have firearms? I know that's not like a killing people issue, but I don't think we're in the world of trying to say, hey, your laws are wrong and our laws are right. Unfortunately, China is kind of like, on their laws, Taiwan is part of their country. And Taiwan says, no, we're our own. Now, I see what you're saying is that Taiwan's like, hey, we're our own country. And we're not really saying, yes, you are, yes, you're not. We
won't take a stance.
Yeah, and that's the gray area you're talking about.
I think no answer is an answer, personally, with all things.
You think no? What do you think no answer is, though? I feel like no answer could be either one on this one.
No.
Do we think they're a country?
No.
See, I think we do.
See, I think officially we don't. The fact that we won't actually say.
I think we think they are a country, but we don't want to upset China. So
then we won't say it. So then we care more. It may be 51-49, but our 51 is to China.
Yeah. No, 100%. Okay, second beer.
Yep.
We are drinking.
So holy 9.5, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Holy 9.5, dude.
Dude, Voodoo Ranger likes to
Correct
just
me if
kill
I'm
us.
wrong, but 3 or 4 Saturdays ago, I thought you and I came to a treaty, if you will, that we were no longer going to be doing these 8 and 9 percenters. First of all, I have taken the high road and said that I was going to comply with said directive. You clearly said fuck it.
Sorry, guys. I'm grabbing the label here.
Dude, so funny, guys. So I want to rewind 72 hours ago, and Cody and I were at a friend's pig roast. There's probably like 30, 40, 50 people there, right?
Yeah.
And I can only assume that you were drinking Michelob Ultra or something like. I was drinking Coors Light or something like. And it's so funny how you can literally have 5, 6, 7 of those throughout, a cornhole tournament or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't even feel it. You can have 1.5 of these. And like, yep, I had a couple beers.
Yeah. And that's probably why they say Fruit Force is a high-flying fruit punch IPA landing at a powerful 9.5%. Prepare for takeoff and hold on to your aviators, baby. How funny is that? So,
yeah, I'm hanging on.
So,
I'm trying to get out of my hard questions now. So that way I don't
so you can
sound like a jackass in a beer.
So, what's funny is when we made that negotiation about 9.5ers, what I took out of that, see, again, this is probably why China and Taiwan are in conflict. What I took from that was, hey, we're not going to do that for 2 in a row if we ever record 2 in a row.
Oh, okay. So you don't want to screw up our Saturdays. You want to torpedo our Tuesday nights. And then, oh, by the way, I have to catch a 5 a.m. flight tomorrow. So let's just really pour some hot sauce on it, right?
You should have done that. You could have. You actually had the ability to choose, and I didn't override you. I said, hey, let's try those.
Hold on, China. Did I not have and was in the process of opening another 6-pack?
What was the other one, do you think?
6.4.
6.4, okay. No, I agree. Do 2 of these. Let's do 2. I only want 2. We'll save 2 more, and we'll have these for a fun day. We'll do 2 out of 6. I'm good with that, honestly.
Right. Sorry, this is going to be 4-pack discussions, guys.
Yeah, I'm fine.
My gosh.
Yeah. Okay, so what's China's goal with all this? So that's what I would like to. That's what I was trying to figure out. Is like, why does China care so much about? Like, at a certain point, it's like, okay, is this even worth the frustration? And do you think they have a goal? What do you think? What do you think the goal here is? Like, why does China even want Taiwan to be part?
So I thought you said something really thought provoking, in that they have this manufactured chip on their shoulder. Like, I never won back in the 40s.
Yep, that is a good point.
Man, that was really humble.
That you made it, though, right? Through my mouth.
I was literally just rehashing what you said. Holy shit, that was the best point you've ever said, Jared. Are you kidding me right now, dude? I'm trying to further a conversation, and you're just patting your own back. Right?
I didn't mean to do it that way, but yes, I'm sorry.
I'll call you. No. So with me, in my head, as I was doing all this research, it's one of those where, like, look, you're not going to reap the benefits of me without me having you.
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am understanding China's original beef.
Yeah, because right now Taiwan collects taxes. They don't go to Beijing, right? They have GDP. It doesn't go to China. So there's value of what Taiwan's doing, and China's like, we don't get any of that value. And every year, Taiwan is an immensely valuable country, if we want to say that, landmass. And we're going to get to why it's
grouping of people.
Yeah, we're going to talk about why it's so strategic, I should say, in a minute here. But I think that's a good point that I mentioned earlier, kind of. Right?
Yeah. No, I thought sound.
But the one that I was thinking of, and what I found actually, and when I was doing a little bit of research, is if you split up the world into GDP, if you say, okay, how much is every country kind of producing? Well, America, we are number 1 in pretty much GDP.
Shout out consumerism.
20%. We produce 20% of the total world GDP, right? China just hit 20% too. So they are number 1 as well. We tied up.
You had Taiwan and you get?
Well, exactly. That does help them out. But here's where the numbers really start getting kind of lopsided.
Actually, in that GDP calculation, is Taiwan included in China or no?
No, it's not. Taiwan would help, but again, it's not huge. It would probably
No, I mean,
yeah.
But it gives them the edge.
And even China is not actually tied up with us. They're just close. But they're within striking distance compared to everyone else. Like the next 20 countries don't even add up to what China has on us. So it's U.S. We control a lot of just the global commerce. China controls a lot of the global commerce. Well, China goes like this. If we do the math at all the countries that we border, not including Russia, mostly Asian dominant countries, right? We have 50% of the global GDP. Why don't we have 50% of the global GDP? We could be the superpower with that. But Taiwan is kind of a little thorn in their side. Like, hey, we can't go pretend to go take over a neighboring country or convince them to be part of China if we have this Taiwan little brother that pretends that they're not a real nation of us. So essentially, if China wants to grow economically, not with just natural kind of progression, but also territorially.
Landmass, yeah.
Exactly, which you kind of need to do at a certain point, right? There's a reason that Alaska became part of the U.S., right? There's a reason, right? China, I think if they're looking at it, and they've been doing this in the South China Sea, where they've been kind of building little islands, essentially.
And by building, you literally mean
dirt.
Chinese. Yeah, they're literally just shooting dirt
into the ground and
into
making
the
islands.
ocean to create it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
it's
they're
actually quite fascinating. I don't know if you've seen the videos.
Oh, yeah. Super neat. Like they're making airstrips out there and they're loaded with planes. And so I think China, they're looking at it long term and they're saying, hey, we have a population issue. We already talked about that. We need to grow. Well, all these neighboring countries are growing. Perfect. We're the only one with a significant military, right? If you look at all of the neighboring countries, they don't have militaries. We all are very similar in cultures, so they're kind of similar in some sort. I'm sure I'm going to get some flack on that, but we're similar in cultures, Southeast Asia areas. Why don't we just take them all and now become half of the world's economic powerhouse? We double what America does. We double what Western powers do. We control the world economic. I think that's what their kind of thing is. Not military might, but economically what they can control. And I think Taiwan is their only reason they can't do it yet, because it seems like kind of like, hey, if I was going to invade, say, Thailand, or if I was going to invade North Korea or the Koreas, right, it's China. They'd be like, well, if Taiwan's standing by themselves, we can do it too. They haven't even fought yet. It's kind of like, hey, they haven't even tried and they're still by themselves. We can fight hard. So I think that Taiwan kind of is kind of one of those things that's kind of like that roadblock for them to expand. What do you think about that? Bad or good?
No, so I'm trying to think. So almost, yes, we oftentimes, and maybe my history is a little off here. So I'm going to, you kind of taught me this years and years ago, trying to create everything as an analogy. It makes it a lot more digestible, palatable, et cetera, to the common person. So maybe let me make sure I understand it, my history, before I expand on this. So the U.S., look, I understand the world has their opinion over the U.S., but the U.S. are battle-proven fighters.
Yeah.
Right? World War I, World War II, us and all of our buddies kicked everyone's ass, right?
And I don't think our buddies do very well without us.
They don't, but I just want to give credit. Hey, you picked the right side at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something to that. China, in recent history, are they proven?
No.
From a military standpoint?
None.
I know that they often like to tout that they are a near-peer threat.
Yeah.
That's kind of this new common term over the last couple decades, maybe? Mm-hmm. So is that what you're trying to say, is like saying, hey, what?
I don't think they are.
No. What I'm trying to say is the view on, hey, are you really even a badass? You can't even get your little brother to say you're mine.
Exactly.
To where saying, hey, you are, I know you like to think that your military is big, bad, and you guys march really cool, but can you even fight? Because I've proven that I can scrap.
Well, I look at it as, can you even protect your own people? Can you even govern your entire nation? Taiwan isn't even saying that you're their parent.
They've literally asked for emancipation.
Exactly. So if I was going to do a neighboring country and saying, hey, become my child, follow my rules, and we'll see economic freedom. You'll have more jobs than you ever had. And they're going to go like this. Seriously? Why did Taiwan leave?
What do you think would happen? Let's just say it is a non-military conflict. There are no acts of war.
Taiwan just says, yeah, we're in.
Yeah. There's enough economic pressure.
Yeah.
Chinese just flex their muscle, and all the companies be like, oh, sorry, Taiwan. I'm going to go. What do you think that does to the immigration? Specifically the U.S.? Do you think we see a large influx of Taiwanese people? I think yes.
So I was actually reading how many people in Taiwan recognize themselves as Taiwanese versus Chinese.
Was that improper of me to say?
No. I'm just wondering because it would be the Taiwanese people that would not want to be recognized as Chinese.
Correct.
Those would be the people that would be most likely to immigrate. You also have to have...
Also, what you were asking is, let's just say there's X amount of people in Taiwan. How many of those X consider themselves non-Chinese?
I actually looked that up.
I don't know that stat.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, hey, if you're... you've probably heard of people that are in Arizona, and they're like, yeah, I'm Mexican. Maybe I'm just here for work. Okay, so you're not American. There's people in Taiwan that are very similar. They still believe themselves to be Chinese, ethically, everything. And then there is a subgroup that say, no, I'm Taiwanese. I was born in Taiwan, or I immigrated to Taiwan. I am Taiwanese. I believe in our Taiwanese government. Every year it has increased. I think it's like 65-35 now. So 65% of the people in Taiwan believe themselves to be Taiwanese. China hates this, right? Because, technically their lineage is all Chinese, really, because Taiwan was not really populated. But as more people believe themselves to be Taiwanese, they're much harder to convince if they decide to invade. You have to essentially get rid of them or convince them. To your point, do they just kind of leave? And they did that before, which is hilarious. They actually literally went from mainland to Taiwan. So these are the type of people that in their DNA, they're already ready to kind of flee. It seems like, hey, I'm good. I can move. And they're prosperous too.
So is this messed up? And I know you've covered in probably the last 9-10 years of your career. You've covered almost east of the Mississippi, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you haven't really traveled too much in Texas.
No.
For work or professional or personal.
No. Dallas.
Lucky you. It's almost one of those things, and this is silly, and this is probably just two beer talk. I almost equate that to you go to Texas, they will literally say I'm a Texan before they say I'm an American.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's a problem.
Texas is the only flag that flies at the same level as the U.S. flag.
So Taiwan has taken the Texan thing even farther. Like, I guarantee there's a document somewhere in our federal government specifically for Texas.
100%.
And it says, hey, if Texas tries to secede,
yeah,
here's what we're going to do.
It has to.
It's already there.
Because it's like often joked about where it's like, you better.
Joking about. They have it like in their like legislator at least every 4 years. Once every 4 years, it like pops up.
It's like, what, another Democrat? Let's secede.
Texas goes crazy.
That's how they think, though.
They do. They're like, okay, maybe we're out this time around. Maybe the star is brighter on our side.
The first 30 of them, they're all right. This one is going to piss me off.
Yeah. 100%. Texas is they're a free ranger or a lone ranger.
Lone ranger.
Yeah. So I wanted to go through a couple of things. What leads people to believe that possibly a war between China and Taiwan is either coming, or what should we be looking out for? I think this is kind of cool. This is like kind of the, if our leaders in the military, our leaders, in the executive branch, really the president.
Oh, shout out past podcast.
Right. If they see these things coming from China, indicator, red flag, red flag, red flag.
So we've already talked about this earlier. I think the biggest red flag is their metaphorical middle finger to our elephant walk.
I think that's a big red flag.
I mean, if I can't think of a bigger red flag than saying, nah, dude, we're going to continue practicing.
100%. So that's a good red flag for us. But here are all of the kind of like, okay, these guys are preparing for an invasion, right? What are we looking for? First one is modern war compared to past kind of war takes a lot of very key munitions, not bullets, but large missiles, rockets, tanks, things like that. And so those things are very easy to track via satellite images. It's not like a factory that produces bullets, ramps up and now produces 10x. When you see missiles, they're moving on trucks in most cases.
Trucks, trains.
Exactly. And so one of the things that you'll see is that China will start surging production of ballistic and cruise missiles and any type of long-range bombardment type of munitions. You'll see this in commercial imaging. Even Google Earth can take images that can show a stockpile increasing over not years, but now over weeks. You'll see stockpiles increasing. So that's kind of red flag number one. Red flag number two is you'll see China starting taking visible steps to insulate their economy from industrial disruptions and sanctions. So the main one that China is absolutely dependent on from outside sources is oil. So you'll see oil stock and oil reserve tanks, tripling or quadrupling in size, meaning that, hey, there used to be, oil reserve areas with, say, 5 tanks, and now there's 30 tanks, all within a year's period of time. That's a big red flag. That's not economic growth. Economic growth would be 1 or 2 a year. If they're looking to essentially go without oil for a long period of time, they're going to increase it because China doesn't have the natural ability really to get oil out of the ground. They don't really have a lot of oil reserves. They're dependent on mostly Russia for their oil, and of course us and Saudi Arabia. But we're going to block all that off. So we'll see. Hey, damn, they're storing a lot of oil, a lot of precious materials. What's going on there? That's kind of odd. They're not using it for anything. They're storing it. You'll also see, and this is actually based on our intelligence agency, you'll see that all of their military will stop their normal training regimens and start performing maintenance on pretty much all major equipment. So all equipment will start getting maintained, and kind of going through pre-war maintenance. So every single vehicle that has been out in deployment, doing practice training sessions, they'll all be on base, getting one by one, getting reviewed for pre-war effort. And so you'll see almost all of the effort for basic training and taking the entire military. They'll say, hey, you guys need to go get all this equipment ready because the equipment's more important than your actual life in most cases for this, sadly.
It's horrible to say. But.
Yeah. Honestly, I think even the soldiers, though, would say, hey, I don't want to be in a truck that's going to break down because there's 4 of us in it. But still. Okay. So, kind of preparing stuff. What else we got here? This is a weird one. You'll see large public blood drives near large coastal cities occurring within China. So you all of a sudden notice that military or any type of public effort to start collecting blood, red flag.
So hold on. I want to challenge that one.
Go for it.
Man, sorry to all past biology professors. So is this, I guess I have a question before I push back. Is the blood drives to start to strategically almost change the mindset of the nearby population to where you want to continuously donate blood? Because blood is only good for what I believe a month.
No, you refrigerate it. It's good for
I thought blood was only good for a month.
I'm pretty sure you can refrigerate blood.
Yeah, you can boil it too, I guess. But I'm just saying, if it's refrigerated, how long is it good for?
Freeze it. I don't know. Fact check me on that one. Dude,
I thought blood was only good for like a month.
I don't think.
So that's what I thought. Was this just to change a mindset?
Oh no, this was to prepare for blood loss. Any type of ports will now kind of essentially stop moving merchant items and prepare for petroleum, oil, and lubricants.
Yeah. Red cells are stored in refrigerators at 6 degrees Celsius for up to 42 days. So I think that's just a change of mindset of a nearby population.
Well, no, you would do that 30 days prior to invasion.
Yeah, I guess.
Right? Like you're going to have the biggest losses within like 10, 15 days of a amphibious vehicle, like Normandy style onslaught. Like you're going to have a lot of, yeah, exactly. So those are interesting. I read through those and I was thinking they all make sense to me. The blood drive one, I like how you pushed back on that one a little bit.
Everything else made sense. Yeah.
Yeah. 42 days, 30 days is a good number. So I guess, hey, if they're doing large, massive blood drives, expect invasion within 30 days. Like that's what I would expect, I guess.
It's just one of those things, man, where I hope, the Lillians Mavericks and their kids don't live through a world war.
I know.
And I can't see, just because of all of our allies, all of China's allies, I can't picture out a scenario where we get involved with a perceived near peer.
Mm-hmm.
I know you challenged that a little bit, but would you at least agree that that is a commonly accepted term to China from a military standpoint as near peer?
Yeah. They're definitely not somebody we want to mess around with. Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things, I view that as like, damn, I could beat him, but that's going to really fuck me up if I beat him up.
And that's what keeps us from going to war, because China is like, I definitely don't want.
Like, I can beat you, but you're going to hurt me.
Exactly. No one wants to go to battle with somebody that you will be crippled at the end.
Yeah.
Right?
Because all that does is walk right in, Mr. Average Person, and 100%. You can have me.
And surprisingly, I think a lot of people always think, oh, well, U.S. just kicked ass in World War I and World War II. We kicked ass, but the funny thing was with both of them, which no one ever wants to kind of, I think there's pro-Americans are going to be upset with this, but we walked in on the 10th day. Like both times, I get it. We walked, and maybe we walked in at the perfect time to end the war fast.
Mm-hmm.
But we walked in when most people were already a little bit beat up. They were beat up a little bit, right? You got to imagine, like, you had Germany and Britain and France already beating the shit out of each other. And we walk in and everyone's a little bloody already. And we're like, we're fresh. Let's go. We've been building shit for the last 4 years for this. I get it. I know people.
They attacked us in December, right? Like, yeah.
But we were already ready. We're already ramping up. You're
not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
We went in, and it's good. No, I'm not saying it's bad, but we also didn't want to get in the conflict. Smart on us. We were the smartest. Everyone wanted our help.
I always wonder, I would love to talk to someone. Like, I wonder if Japan regrets what they did.
So much so.
They had to. Like, I've never got the opportunity to talk to someone who's like a true, like, Japanese historian. But I'd be curious to see if there's anything, like, I haven't done any research. I wonder if they realize, I fucked up there in December.
I listened to Ed Carlin. He does Hardcore History. Great podcast.
Okay.
3-5 hour long. Right?
Oh, they're little Joe Rogan guy.
Even longer, man. Most of them are. And he tells it is such passion. You can tell he does a lot of research, and he tells you, each event as they progress. And I just listened to the Japan and the engagement in the Pacific. So all the battles between Japan and the U.S. that occurred, these battles go they go under the radar. Most people don't know about what happened in the Pacific. They know a lot what happened in Europe, right? They know that there, of course, was the Battle of Midway. They know the battle in Pearl Harbor. But there's a lot of things that got on in the Pacific the whole time. And we're kind of like, battling in the ocean's weird. It's not like you know what's going on because it's just so big. It's immense. And so I listened to the whole thing, and Japan, the guy that did it all, he was the shogun, which is like essentially the commander in chief, but he wasn't like the president. If you can kind of think of those roles being kind of separate.
Okay.
The emperor in Japan kind of owns some of the policy, and then the shogun owns the military. He's the commander of the Navy and the Army. When he made the decision to do the Pearl Harbor bombing, he said this will be the start and the end of my decision. We'll find out when. He didn't know, but he knew he had to do it because the oil was the biggest problem for him. And same thing I think would happen to China. He was going to run out of oil in 3 months. And unless he invaded some U.S. territories, there was no way to get more oil. So his entire invasion of China and nearby territories would end because it would run out of oil. So he would need to invade the Philippines, which the U.S. currently was part of. So super crazy. He was up against a wall. That's what made him do it. And so I don't know what you do, right? He was kind of like, do we just stop this whole thing, or do I do it and see what happens? It's scary, right?
Isn't it?
Because if you put somebody against the wall, they're a lunatic. They'll do whatever it takes.
Always.
So,
Freaking always.
A couple things here, man. What would be the strategy? So let's say this is possible, which I don't want. I don't want it. I don't want any of it. I don't think it's good for anybody economically. I think everybody loses a lot of money. Everybody goes into family crisis. You get lives lost, brothers, fathers, sons. Super sucky all around, like horrible. What happens? How does China do this? Well, there's what I would say the better way and the not so better way. The better way is less costly on all fronts, meaning less lives, less money, less everything. And they would do a naval blockade of Taiwan. So Taiwan's an island, very easy to do. You surround it with your security. They have more ships than the U.S. right now. 330 ships. We have 290. Their ships, of course, compared to the U.S., not ready for marine team use. Like, they're just not ready for open ocean. All of ours are ready to, like, cross the Pacific. Ready, but they could surround and essentially bombard any type of incoming supplies. Taiwan is dependent on agricultural requirements, things like that. You get now less food.
They don't produce shit. Yeah.
Yes.
They're tiny.
You do produce some things, but you just stop producing. You now become how do we get enough food to supply for our 24 million people country? You don't turn that over. So that's the easy one, because what you do is you block everybody from coming in. Historically, this is actually how most battles have been won. I know most people want to glorify battle and the war. Blood and... Yeah. Most battles have been won by essentially not allowing supplies to travel. That's it. You don't get any wheat. You don't get any corn. You don't get any rice. And your people start going like this. Okay, king, we're going to kill you, or we're going to join that guy. That's how it works. Because we're starving to death. My kid just died because we don't have enough food. So this is interesting, because this is how history is kind of played out. They do a blockade. That's the easy one. And all of a sudden, the Taiwanese people and the government say, okay, China, we do believe in the one China policy. Let's go ahead and have a treaty. We're going to become a separate state under China. We will believe that you are our father. That's the easy route. What do you think about that? Do you think it's likely? Do you think it's the best route? Do you think that's like, okay, you know what, China? Yep. If you have to do that, we're not going to get involved. What do you think U.S. should do if they start doing something like that?
So I'm trying to think back. Would that be considered an act of war?
Oh, no, it is. You're starving people.
Like,
it is. I think it is considered one. If Japan went to Hawaii right now and blocked all bananas from coming in, that's an act of war. Yeah, we would consider that an act of war if we were in Hawaii, visiting. What do you mean Japan is blocking bananas from coming to Hawaii? That's an act of war. You're pirating ships. You're essentially shooting at merchant ships. It's an act of war. Because how do you stop a merchant ship from coming in? You take it over. You take their supplies. You sink it. It's weird, right? I kind of thought the same thing, but as soon as I was like, oh, if we did that to one of our island nations like Hawaii, no way.
So we're hypocrites. We're hypocrites, right? What we consider an act of war, We may not want to consider acts of war with
you-
other entities. We are
Our
hypocrites, right?
initial thought was that, but then as soon as you put it in perspective, I think we both agree that is an act of war.
So individually, but I'm talking now. We are president and vice president of. Well, actually, no. You're in the Congress, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm the president. Do you want to consider that an act of war to therefore declare war?
Yeah, but I don't have, just because two nations go to war to each other, this happens, unfortunately, quite often in Africa. I don't need to get involved myself with every act of war.
Africa and China and Taiwan are different.
Let's say China and Taiwan do this. Let's say Taiwan says this is an act of war.
Mm-hmm.
They do say that.
Do we just give them a blank check like we've done in Ukraine?
This is what I'm trying to say. Do we involve ourselves with a non-aggressive tactic of a blockade?
So you're asking me what would I do, or what does the U.S. do?
Yeah, what would you do if you were controlling the U.S.? Remember, I reserve all the hard questions for you after 2 beers.
I know. 9.5ers.
Jared's like, what dimension am I in right now?
Yeah, what's an act of war?
Falling through this couch right now.
What do I do? Honestly,
Do you? Not one boot has touched the ground.
If I'm the leader of the free world,
America.
and look, I know this is limp dick, but look, I did a little bit of research on a lot of these war games have been played out. We would take such a significant hit to our aircraft, to our watercraft. 3,000 plus troops. And guys, just to put that in perspective, that's almost as many that we lost in Iraq and Afghanistan over 20 years.
I think it's much more, actually, but yeah.
Well, we lost about 6,000 troops
Okay.
in Iraq and Afghanistan, and projected we would lose about 3,000 in this conflict.
Oh, I thought you said 30.
Oh, 3.
3.
Yeah.
Is that third? That's that second beer.
Exactly. Maybe I did say it. I'm sorry.
So you
guys,
say,
it's one of those things where I get really annoyed, and I'm sure I know a fraction of an amount of all the world politics at play and all the shit. I am not trying to self-proclaim me as an expert on global politics and understanding. But what I can get frustrated as an American citizen and, ex-U.S. military member at that point,
veteran, yeah.
I get really pissed whenever we are expected to play world police, and then people get pissed at us when we play world police. Basically, it's like, well, fuck you then. Honestly, is what I want to say.
Yeah, like
excuse my language, but that's
you fall in
kind of what I want to get to.
Either way you go,
I'm wrong with both decisions. Oh, you didn't want to protect the little guy, but what about their government beliefs and their values and et cetera? Oh, you just wanted China to win. No. Oh, so now you want to pick a fight with a near peer. You want to decimate our military forces so that way a Russia or whomever could come into us. No. Well, you can't have both. Because unfortunately, while there are a lot of grays in life and decisions, this is a very black and white. Because if we do defend China's little brother in Taiwan, it will decimate us. We will win, but it will decimate us.
There's a lot of similarities. As you just said that right now. Fucking, I can't get off analogies always, but I'm just thinking like it's so complicated. How do you make it more simple? That's what I always think about. Like, how do you make it more simple? And I'm thinking there's 2 things that I was just thinking that is so relative to the odd position that America is as a world police. And I think the first one, we already talked about kind of parents and things like that. And I think fathers get that. They are the household police. Let's just be honest. I think in America, and I would actually say more likely in other countries, especially even the ones that we're speaking of right now, the father is the disciplinary. But they get punished if they discipline a little too much or too little, right? If they discipline too little, the child might be unruly even more so with their mother, with their teacher, with other kids in the neighborhood. The kid becomes, unfortunately, a menace to society. We see this, right? If they discipline too much, all of a sudden, the government steps in and says, you are beating your child. Your wife says, hey, you're too hard on my son or my daughter or whatever it is. And so it's kind of one of those things that a lot of fathers probably have to deal with, kind of a similar position that the U.S. is in. It's like, hey, guys, I don't want to have to do anything. If you just played nice, stop fucking fighting. I think that's what most dads would want to see.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to get in the middle of it, but if I have to get in the middle of it, I'm going to get in the middle of it. And that exact tone almost sounds like where America feels like when they have to get in the middle of Taiwan and China. Like, guys, play nice. We get it. You like each other kind of, but you hate each other because of some stupid historical thing.
Yep.
Like, guys, this is not worth hundreds of thousands of lives. Let's be honest. We're talking about 3,000 lives of America. It's projected to be hundreds of thousands of Chinese and Taiwanese lives in soldiers and also civilians.
That's why I get pissed.
And it's like one of those things like, guys, this is a big fucking deal. A lot of lives lost on both ends for what end? And that's what I was thinking, how do you simplify that? Because it's so complicated for us to think about it. But a father trying to just raise children, what amount of discipline is allowed before it becomes too much or too little? And in your world police thing kind of got me kind of thinking of, that's kind of where America is. It's like, guys, I don't want to have to step in.
We're hated and loved for being a world police.
Bingo. Like, we want all the benefits, but we don't want any of the too far stepping in.
Mm-hmm.
So less
did I answer your question?
100%.
Okay.
Less costly option, blockades. Guys, I'm not going to step in. That's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah.
We're going to probably try to for a very neutral option. Like, hey, guys, let's help out.
In every scenario that you pitched me, I'm going to try to find a way to where not one American life or one American dollar is spent and or lost.
Okay. Here's the big one.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Man, I'm surprised we didn't crack this third beer open then.
I know. And guys, we're going to go a little over on this one. I like this one. I think a lot of people probably will discount how relative this is, but I could see this being the next biggest thing in history. We are I didn't know this. We are in the longest period of peace in world history right now. Like, general peace.
Yeah, that's right.
General peace, meaning lives lost per year in economic growth right now. Right? I get it, guys. Afghanistan, Iraq.
I was just going to say, how weird for Americans because we just got out of a 20-year war.
Yeah, but guess what? Those are little blips on the radar for lives lost. And every single 10 to 20 years in the world history, there is a major conflict. I know we say World War I, World War II. Okay, you have massive loss of life every 50 years prior to that. Right? Just in America, you have, Civil War, Revolutionary War. That's in America. Then you have Chinese Revolutionary Wars, Chinese Civil Wars. You have Europe always fighting each other every 10 years between France and Britain.
Middle East.
You have the Middle East. Always pissed off. You have the you have the Catholics fighting. If you look at history, it is full of more war than less. And so right now we're in a peacetime. So if you just look at history and say, okay, guys, there is conflict in the air possibly. It's due. How do we mitigate it? So here's second scenario for you, buddy. Chinese go ahead and start an invasion. They've been preparing, but we keep on discounting their preparedness. It's not that bad.
Rationalizing it.
Just like what Pearl Harbor, honestly. There's not really, Japan would not do it. Chinese go ahead and try a sabotaging of cyber securities between all of the bases in Taiwan. They start missile attacks on all military infrastructure, including military bases, all air defense bases, so runways are getting bombed so that they can't take off. China's Navy now starts a full mount amphibious assault. They crossed 110 miles of water with their 300 ships, plus another 1,000 ships of merchant ships that they have now essentially commandeered. they're able to deliver 300,000 troops onto the beaches of Taiwan. Taiwan is, by this point in time, because it does take some time, they are mounting defenses, they're planting mines, they are doing their best to slow down the assault. Luckily for us, the islands always have an advantage, right? With the force, the amphibious force, the delivering force has a disadvantage. Not only is it unknown territory, but you're usually going uphill, you're getting through water, you're going through sand. All these sound very, very small, but just like Normandy, it's an immense effort to move troops across an ocean and get a I don't know what kind of say, a defensive position on the island. So at this point, there's massive losses on both sides. They go full tilt. Let's just say that. So China says, hey, we're going full tilt. We're taking the island. We've tried stating that you are part of us. You have denied us. We gave you a deadline. You did not meet it. 6 months later, they're invading. And now they are on the island. Within 24 hours, we are notified.
Within 24 minutes, we're notified.
I'm just saying.
I know.
We know that's going on. America public is well aware the next day. And now the president has to say, 2 buttons, go, no go. What are we doing? Just so you know, I'll give you one more little caveat. 70% of all semiconductors that are in your phones, computers, cars, TV screens, refrigerators, ovens, houses, thermostats are built in Taiwan. Semiconductors are the number one item required right now for the global economy to run.
So I don't appreciate the positioning that you just concluded with, because you're assuming that in China's takeover that production, while it may be hindered, would stop.
Taiwan semiconductor, the biggest semiconductor producer in the world, has in their doctrine, China invades Taiwan, burn the buildings, we have flights out, private jets for you to leave.
Is that hypothetical? Is that real?
That's
Because
real.
I'm not aware of that.
That's real. That's the craziest thing you've ever heard, all right?
That's awesome. I want to meet the guy that put that in that contract.
He literally has a list of people that are required talent to leave and start the factory somewhere else.
I want to meet that guy because I could learn a couple things. I actually want him to write a fucking book, and I want to read that book.
So,
but
he actually calls it what's it called? What was in the Civil War when they used to just the South would just burn entire areas so that they couldn't grow stuff? What kind of war effort is that?
Guerrilla. Well, it's not guerrilla. I'm sorry. It's
called something burn.
No.
That's what he's labeled it as.
Well, shit. It's almost, who was that? The railroad ties.
So Sherman is the guy that's known for it. Richard Sherman, I think, is the Civil War Southern
It wasn't
guy.
Richard, was it?
Something Sherman.
I know it was Sherman's ties.
He did the 100-mile march to the sea.
But it's essentially fucked up all the railroad ties and burned everything in his path.
So he has
Sherman's March, right?
Yeah. And he has that as the title of his thing. He's like, hey, if China invades, we burn everything. And they're the largest semiconductor. Now, there's multiple, of course, but he's the one that produces a majority. I think it's called Taiwan Semiconductor. They're getting out of there because they know that his company's gone. China owns it. And then they're going to try to make it work. So just so you know.
Okay, so I wasn't aware of that piece.
Yeah. I forgot to add that. That was very special for you.
A little bit.
The economy, the economic impact to everyone there.
The world.
All cars stop getting produced. All cell phones stop getting produced.
Well,
all missiles
no.
stop getting produced.
So now let's just go and start going produced. But the ones that are produced, think of the surge in price. Think about the gap that you just create overnight. Because no
one's buying them.
Only the elite.
Missiles? No, I don't even know if the elite. All semiconductors. I honestly think if China invades Taiwan, let me just make sure you have the full repercussions. If China does that and Taiwan essentially shuts down semiconductor production, I think there are people that go around and collect phones and computers from private citizens and say, please donate. We need to make missiles.
Oh, you World War II it.
Oh yeah.
All hands on deck.
Pieces of metal, yeah. I just think that at a certain point, like I'm not saying I don't have your answer yet, but I think in some countries that occurs because missile production can't go up. There's not a stockpile of semiconductors. They barely meet needs.
So this little magical date.
Hopefully, yeah, it's not magical, but that's the date that they provided, yeah.
In Taiwan, I believe in what I read, they said that they're not going to be ready from a defense standpoint until 2025.
Yeah.
Is what they've been putting out.
And even if they defend it, it's not prepared, just so you know. I don't think
that's what they said about Ukraine.
That's true.
I mean, seriously, though.
Yeah.
They thought Russia was just going to walk in and say, bitch, give me your keys.
Scorched earth. That's what they call
it. So, honestly, here's what I'm surprised. It is maybe, and I'll tell myself here, maybe I did limited research. Maybe I didn't go down the right rabbit holes. But I'm actually surprised that, there's not 20 to 30, not of the superpowers, because there's not 20 to 30 superpowers, but 20 to 30, like, okay, you're a player here. Haven't gotten together on a document saying, hey, China, it's not just the U.S., it's U.S., and we're rolling with Canada. We're rolling with the majority of Western Europe. We're rolling with people. Say, don't fuck with them. Like, come on, man. Like, this is literally bad for everyone.
That's because they all agree Taiwan is part of China.
I know.
We're the only one that kind of says ambiguity. Germany, France, UK, Australia. They're like, yeah, Taiwan is, like, on their maps, which is the weirdest thing. I looked this up. On other countries' maps, Taiwan is China. It's an island of China. Like, it's not like...
Are we really the only superpower that recognizes them? Like, we're the only notable...
We're the only one that thinks that they're kind of different.
We won't even have the balls to say they're different, first of all.
Exactly, but our maps kind of like... They say Taiwan. That means it's different.
Literally,
I looked it up. Most
spokespeople that they have to correct the president, saying,
But our maps, like when we draw a map, like in history class, in social economics class, right? We see maps and, usually there's a little line and there's a color and there's a name, and that means it's a different country. On their maps, there's a little line, but the island is the same color as China. So, and when you say superpower, I don't think there's many superpowers. Like I think there's
3 or 4.
Exactly. So what other superpower? Russia, of course, sides with China. Right? UK, I don't think is a superpower. They're a power. It's 3. It's 3. I would say. There's nobody else. So what do you think? Do you think Germany or something?
No. I mean, India just has all those fucking people, though.
They're not a superpower.
I know, but they have so many people.
I know. They're not
whatever. I know. Okay.
So what do you think? If that happens, they invade, they shut down semiconductors.
I didn't know 70%. That is a...
Dude.
I can fact check you, and that's real.
Mm-hmm.
70% of semiconductors.
Mm-hmm. 70% come out of Taiwan.
Guys, you only think the supply chain is fucked up right now because of COVID.
Yeah, and the only reason Taiwan didn't fuck it up even worse is because they didn't really shut down all the way. The other 30% is like China and Korea.
Well, thank God that.
So I think China's play there is to own the semiconductor market. They own the semiconductor market. They can go invade any country they want, and no one can ever say anything. Hey, you don't want to trade us anymore with oil? Okay, you don't get any more semiconductors. So China wants to own something. Right now, they're struggling being able to own a critical supply chain. Oil is critical. We're finding out that lithium and cobalt are critical for batteries and green energy. What other thing is critical that China can control? Semiconductors seem to be that little wild card. America, and I think it's a wild card too, because what did we just pass in the last 6 months? The Semiconductor Act that literally put billions of dollars into U.S. semiconductor building. So I think that's a defensive position where we're trying to say, hey, we need to build at least bare minimum for a wartime effort. It's kind of like the Farm Bill. Like, hey, guys, we're not going to depend on like bread from other countries because that country might side with the bad guys. just like semiconductors.
And that's what's so interesting to me on a world scale, especially when we start talking about trading and
Trading's weird. You're friendly today. You're friendly maybe not tomorrow, right?
yeah, so I heard.
So what are we doing there? Are we helping them out? Money, of course, we're going to give them. But what about people and what about equipment?
Dude, it's just too. Maybe I'm being a pussy here, but it's too dangerous. I can only and look. I know Russia is really taking it right now with Ukraine, not only from an optics standpoint, but obviously they've been not decimated. That's not a proper word, but they're hurting. Mm-hmm. But us going toe to toe with China, I can use the word decimate. And that scares, because we are one of the 2 superpowers in the world, 2 or 3 superpowers in the world, irrefutable. And no one else really likes us. And the only people that like us are the people that have to like us because we do. We are the guy in the locker room. And again, sorry for making too many guys reference, but we are that guy in the locker room that you have to like us.
Over the past 2 decades, just to give you a little stat here, the U.S. has spent $300 billion on Taiwanese chips. China relies on them. Nobody else has the expertise or infrastructure to produce their own. Rand Corporation, which I've referenced in the past a little bit, they predicted that a year-long war, just 1 year, between China and Taiwan, cutting off chip production, would reduce GDP by 5 to 10% in the U.S. So, and yes, about 70%. So 68, whatever. 70% of global supply of semiconductors. Smartphones, cars, computers.
Look, I know that sounds terrible, but can you imagine? Look, the world hates the way that America does life, right? Mm-hmm. But they have to tolerate us because they don't want to screw with us. Can you imagine a decimated naval fleet, a decimated Air Force? Which is what is a reasonable prediction would happen if we went toe-to-toe with a near peer.
Yeah. No,
so with that, I can't put our overall country at risk for semiconductors. I know that sucks. I know it reduces up to 10%. That's massive, guys. But it's not like it would just be U.S. taking that hit. We have the human capital. We have the...
Yeah, we would learn a lesson. And so your thing is like, hey, you know what?
Guys, I'll send you checks. Whatever. And I'll bitch about it in the process.
You're like, hey, China does the invasion, just like I stated. Mm-hmm. Send all the troops. Taiwan's government at some point probably has to surrender.
Yep.
Without America coming into aid. There might be some other countries that try to help. We might try to send money.
No. We will.
Yeah.
Checks in the mail right now.
Yeah. Like we've already sent Ukraine, $100 billion plus right now.
I say, is that it?
And I think Ukraine offers us little to none tactical or strategic value other than fertilizer. I think fertilizer is the only thing, or potash, I should say, of fertilizer. So Ukraine is like, yes, there are some supply chain disruptions there. But semiconductors are like major supply chain issues. So you're right. I think there's a huge, like $100 billion. We would probably say, guys, Taiwan.
Another zero, whatever.
Yeah. But in the end, I don't think any amount of money would help because military equipment, advanced military equipment that the U.S. has.
6 months, years to create.
Years? But also, all of the cool shit is under U.S. secrecy.
Yeah.
We're not giving them any of the good stuff that helps them win. What we're giving them is the bottom of the barrel. Like, hey, here's money to produce, a missile or a rocket that's unguided. Right? Just like Ukraine. This has been the biggest issue with Ukraine. Ukraine has never got any type of planes from us. And that's because our planes are it's the reason we win right now. It's the reason no one wants to touch us, right? Air superiority, we have it, we own it. So that is under immense amount of secrecy. We don't want to give planes to other countries, especially somebody in the Ukrainian or somebody in the old Soviet bloc, which could be taken over 5 years from now. So I think it's interesting. We give them money. Does it really help? Probably not. It's probably a waste of money at some point. It might save some lives.
100% pissing away.
So China now takes over Taiwan.
Yep.
China's like, yeah, well, we own Taiwan the whole time. It pumps back up its semiconductor industry.
Because it will.
We see probably 2 to 3 years of, honestly, probably COVID era semiconductor issues. Let's just say, let's say twice as bad. You're not getting a new car.
Nope.
Apple freaks out because they can't make a new phone.
Earnings take a hit.
New computer. You got to hold on to that old thing that keeps on freezing. But no American lives are lost. Our military is extremely strong. China has taken a huge hit, right? They're going to see a bunch of stuff messed up. They're not going to touch the Pacific Ocean for probably the next 50 years because they got to rebuild for the next 15 to 20.
Because these ships are not overnight purchases.
Oh, no. Purchases are huge. The ship thing is a big deal. I didn't realize it takes multiple years to make some of these big ones. There's a reason China only has 2 carriers.
Sucks.
Yeah, it's big. So I like your position. I like it. The only thing that I'm worried that happens, that as soon as China does this, and just give me your thoughts real quick, and then we'll close this thing up. China gets Taiwan. It takes them, a year and a half. All of a sudden, they plant their flag on the capital.
Yep.
Tempeh, I think it's called.
Yep.
Plant their flag. They're like, hey, guys, you guys are all underneath, Chinese Communist Party rule. You're Chinese again. Taiwan doesn't exist. You're now on the island of Brown or
whatever.
Whatever the island wants, whatever you want to call it, right? Gray. You're now on this island. China goes like this. That was easy. That was easy. Okay, Malaysia, you're next. They do what has happened in every other world war.
I was just about to say, man, it's almost like
that's the
there
playbook.
have been other countries that have overextended themselves, got too greedy. I mean, that play's been ran before, guys.
But it's a lot harder to go over water, right? I think land transitions are a little bit easier, and all the other nations have a connection point, right? North Korea would be easy. They're already going to say yes, pretty much.
Honestly, that's one thing I really don't see is because, and maybe I'm wrong in my thought process here or my facts even, but I don't think in like the
modern era,
the 30s, the First World War happened. In the early 40s, mid 40s, the Second World War happened, right?
World War I was 1918 to 1924, I think.
Okay, that's the 30s. So
sorry,
teens and 20s. Yeah, so I was wrong. And then what? 41 to 45 is when we entered it.
Yeah, we entered it, but I think it was in the late 30s.
Yeah.
UK got in.
All that was to say is the world has become a lot flatter, metaphorically speaking, in today's world.
Information travels.
Well,
I see what you're saying.
Not only information, but also just the connectivity.
We all trade stuff. We're interdependent.
So that's what I meant by the world has become a lot flatter. So I think people, even our smaller, less advanced countries, realize like, oh shit, if I piss him off, that pisses them off, and that pisses them off, and now I don't get my shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually don't envision a world war. Now, I think there's always going to be dick measuring contest.
Yeah.
That I'm not refuting. But as far as a no-kidding world war to where, we see a Hitler-esque regime, like, okay, I take Taiwan. Oh, man, now I take Malaysia. No.
Oh, okay.
So I don't see that personally, just because of the world economic order from a flatness standpoint. Because I think now more than ever, and it's only going to continue to increase, that people truly understand the dependency, whether they want to admit it or not, the true dependency of very strategic strongholds throughout the world.
I think I agree with you. I agree with you there. As long as we have open kind of borders to trade, agree, 100%. I think everybody can think, hey, if all my neighbors, one guy's got my eggs, one guy's got my bread, one guy's got my potatoes, I'm not going to fight with them because I like my eggs for my breakfast.
Right.
That's what we got going on.
That's exactly what it is.
The only time that I think world war or large-scale war occurs is when someone's backed into the corner. When you place sanctions on somebody that hurt them so bad and they have no other option.
Right.
Sanctions, essentially saying, let's say the bully or the bully and his friends say, hey, you know what? You're not allowed oil anymore. You're not allowed eggs anymore.
So
that's when that guy gets a little too crazy, says, fuck it. I got nothing else.
So it's one of those things where right now I rely on one country for eggs, one on bread, one on milk, one on
because
the
those
plate,
are what they're special.
one on the silverware.
They're special at, yeah.
So as soon as one country starts acquiring, oh shit, now it's plate and the silverware. Now it's plate, silverware, and eggs. Now it's plate, silverware, eggs, and bread.
You see how it becomes a little harder?
So,
and we are in that position. We're in that position right now for semiconductors where we're kind of up against a wall with Taiwan. I would say it's slightly. We're not against a wall, but we see a wall. And that's where I just think that countries kind of say, hey, and I think this is where Japan was during World War II. They're like, we're going to run out of oil because of the sanctions that the U.S. put on us. And so I just think that one thing that we are dependent upon, food, energy. Those are the two things. Food and energy. And right now, I think energy is starting to become that issue. Let's just say oil has been demonetized. And right now, what is the first thing that happened in the Ukrainian-Russia war that kind of made headlines for a possible conspiracy? Do you remember?
Wasn't it those reactors? No.
The possible blowing up of that pipeline. Remember the pipeline? The U.S. says we're not part of it at all.
Mm-mm.
Well, it's funny because in multiple war scenarios that I saw, the first thing the U.S. would do is we would go with our submarines and go attack all of the Russian to China oil pipelines. That's weird, right? That makes sense to me. Why wouldn't you cut off their energy? That makes them kind of like, okay, maybe I put too far. So that was the first thing that happened in the Ukrainian-Russian war. It was like significant, and I'm not saying the U.S. did it, of course, but there was some type of sabotage there, and the Germany and Nordic countries all now didn't get Russian oil supply. So, guys, we're closing this thing out. I put Jared in the hot seat for the last 20 minutes. I like it. I like it, man. I think I agree with you, man. I don't want to see any hot war at all. Like, oh my gosh.
Too many women and children, too many civilians' lives get lost.
Just absolutely nonsensical, too. Just for a little, like, what is that piece of land? Like, fucking the size of Arizona? If that. We got 24 million people, right? We got a small piece of land. They produce semiconductors that we all enjoy every day. It's not worth it. Then again, it's funny. What was that episode that we had about China and how they treat people?
Oh, was that the damn organ harvesting?
Yes. So imagine China going into Taiwan, taking it over, and all of a sudden doing a bunch of that because they've been bad for 70 years. And I think we both said that was wrong.
It was horrible.
And it's like, what are these? Like, there's just nuances.
I know.
Over.
It's endless rabbit holes, and that's why there's never
whether it's
a political issue, a world economic issue, world politics issue, because I don't want you to ever misconstrue what Cody and I's, however ludicrous our opinions are, as oversimplifying. Because holy shit, the levers at play here, if you just slightly even tug on that one, I mean, the second, third, fourth, fifth, 18th order of effects on all these decisions, it's exponential.
On both sides.
Yeah.
And no one knows what their next play is.
No.
It's chess matches with dire consequences. So, guys, really appreciate you listening. Way longer than normal. We're actually 30 minutes past due here.
Jeez.
But I would say this one deserved an extra 30 minutes.
This was hard.
It's a hard one. There's not a good answer.
Real.
There's no real answer. It's real.
Some people think imminent. China's called their shot.
Why would they, like, hey, guys, why would they even say that? But I guess they're just trying to, like, set a deadline. Like, hey, become part of China. I love it. Okay, guys, really appreciate you guys listening. Give us a follow. Send us a like. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We want to get our subscribers up so we start getting into the algorithm, of course. Really appreciate it. You guys have a great rest of your day. See ya.
Thanks, guys.